7:08 now. Data obtained exclusively by BBC Radio Kent reveals big variations in how quickly the fire service is responding to emergencies across the county. One of the Kent Fire and Rescue Service's targets is to reach life-threatening incidents within 10 minutes, but its success rate last year varied from 56% in Sevenoaks to 97% in Thanet. The Fire Brigade Union representative for Kent, Mark Simmons, believes there's a simple reason behind the difference in figures.
The government does put some of these failures to reach attendance times down to traffic, but I don't think it's down to traffic. I think it's down to just cuts in funding. We simply haven't got the resources to meet the target. There is, as you say, a big disparity in a couple of them areas. And what's even worse is it seems to be getting worse. And out of all the targets that are set there, for the 13 districts, only 7 of them, only 7 out of 13, actually met the target.
Obviously, you need to look at these figures in a bit more detail, but obviously there have been closures of retained fire stations and what have you. Obviously, you'll look at the figures and see if there's any connection, will you?
Yeah, I mean, even with the closures, let's take the closures out of it and just deal with the stations we've got at the moment. If you was to fully crew up the stations we've got at the moment, which aren't crewed as they should be, I would suspect that we'd go some way to meet them targets.
And that lack of staff, is that
rather than what we've cut in the past.
And the lack of staff, is that a financial restraint, or is it you're just struggling to recruit?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there is a problem with recruitment, but having said that, I think there's still resources on the whole time front that are being cut as well in terms of staff numbers. Whereas on the part-time front, the service is looking to employ more firefighters, but on the whole-time front, on the whole-time firefighters, the service is looking to get rid of firefighters. You know, I do empathise with our senior management. I mean, they've got to save millions of pounds, and there's only one way of doing that, and that is job cuts.
Mark Simmons there from the Fire Brigade Union in Kent. So, our reporter Ben Croucher is at Horton Kirby Fire Station this morning near Sevenoaks, and that is one of 8 earmarked for closure. Morning, Ben.
Good morning. I'm here outside Horton Kirby Fire Station. As you say, it's a quaint little picturesque Kent village, this, and it's got a dinky little fire station to match. There's a fire engine, or fire appliance as they're known these days apparently, sitting dormant in the garage at the moment, quite fortunately. Now, this station is expected to shut its doors for good when a replacement fire station near New Ash Green is finished and fully operational. A number of local residents are up in arms at the prospect, as you might expect. More than 2,500 people signed a petition to keep it open. They believe that fire crews stationed have risked life and limb for locals, and this closure is more a kick in the teeth than any real thanks. Now, I'm joined by the local parish councillor and campaigner against the closure, Colin Wilson. Now, presumably you're none too pleased about the news with the powers that be. What's your latest response to the response time?
Good morning, Ben. Yeah, well, our campaign started off saying that response times would be affected by these closures, and the information that you guys have gathered just goes to cement that in what we thought would be the case, yes.
Why do you think it's so low in Sevenoaks compared with other areas of Kent?
Well, there's been a lot of closures that have hit Sevenoaks. Staffing in Sevenoaks has been a big problem for the fire service. There's also been changes in the past 18 months to the way that fire crews for the part-time stations are employed. They used to hit around about 90% attendance, and since the changes in contracts, that's reduced down to 30%. That's had a big impact.
So with more retained firefighters, less full-time firefighters, the response times go down accordingly?
It's the retained firefighters that have reduced. It's their contracts that have changed, and yes, because of that, the response times have been adversely affected.
So surely if you want quicker response times, you're going to have to pay for it somehow?
That's right. The fire service have been very big on saying how they haven't put an increase on the council tax this year. However, that seems to have been at the expense of response times from fire crews.
Do you think the rural nature, I mean, driving in this morning, a lovely little beautiful drive down some of the country lanes, do you think the rural nature of it can affect those times, and there will be some anomalies in the system?
It certainly doesn't help. Obviously, the fire engines are large machines, and to get down some of these rural roads, it's not easy, even with their lights flashing and their sirens on. But at the end of the day, they do time trials. They're trying to get these stations positioned in such a way as to cut that time difference out.
And presumably, any fire in Horton Kirby would be perfectly serviced by a fire station in Horton Kirby.
That's true, but only on times when Horton Kirby is actually active, and with the changes in these contracts, that reduces the amount of times that these guys can actually be out on the road.
And you're fighting hard to try and keep this station open?
We're still fighting hard to try and keep it open. They're planning to close it at the end of this year, beginning of next year, once New Ash Green's up and running, but we haven't given up yet.
Do you think that the station in New Ash Green can be a success and achieve the quicker response times that Kent Fire and Rescue wants to achieve?
Again, with the rural nature of New Ash Green, that's even worse than here. They're going to struggle to service anywhere other than New Ash Green with a station in New Ash Green.
Colin, thank you very much for your time this morning, and I'll hand you back to the studio.
Thanks very much indeed. Our reporter Ben Croucher there with the latest on those closures. He's talking to Horton Kirby councillor Colin Wilson on the response times from fire crews in the Sevenoaks area. In an hour's time, we'll put those points to the Assistant Director of Operations for Kent Fire and Rescue, Sean Burnell.
Data obtained exclusively by BBC Radio Kent reveals big variations in how quickly the fire service is responding to emergencies across the county. One of the Kent Fire and Rescue Service's targets is to reach life-threatening incidents within 10 minutes, but its success rate last year varied from 56% in Sevenoaks to 97% in Thanet. That's caused some concern, not least at the Fire Brigades Union. Mark Simmons is their Kent rep and says budget cuts are behind the problem.
The government does put some of these failures to reach attendance times down to traffic, but I don't think it's down to traffic. I think it's down to just cuts in funding. We simply haven't got the resources to meet the target. There is, as you say, a big disparity in a couple of them areas. And what's even worse is it seems to be getting worse. And out of all the targets that are set there, for the 13 districts, only 7 of them, only 7 out of 13, actually met the target.
Well, Colin Wilson is the independent parish councillor for Horton Kirby near Sevenoaks. He thinks the reorganisation of the fire service has led to delays in response times.
There's been a lot of closures that have hit Sevenoaks. Staffing in Sevenoaks has been a big problem for the fire service. There's also been changes in the past 18 months to the way that fire crews for the part-time stations are employed. They used to hit around about 90% attendance, and since the changes in contracts, that's reduced down to 30%. That's had a big impact.
Well, joining us live now to discuss this further is Sean Burnell, Assistant Director of Service Delivery for Kent Fire and Rescue. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Claire.
Give us your reaction, first of all, to this big disparity, essentially, in these figures. You're supposed to reach life-threatening incidents within 10 minutes. You can manage that 97% of the time in Thanet, but only 56% of the time in Sevenoaks. Are you concerned?
I wouldn't say we're really concerned. I mean, at the end of the day, we treat all of our emergency calls with the utmost urgency, and we're trying to get there as quick as we can. The problem is when you start to compare areas, like trying to compare Thanet to Sevenoaks, is that they're two completely different areas, and we deliver the service in a different way in those two areas. The reason why we deliver it in a different way is because you have a different population, different housing stock, areas of deprivation, and that's why we have these two differences in these figures. But I think the thing that we'd like to reassure the public is we consider ourselves to be a first-class emergency service, and we do get to life-threatening calls just under the 80%, and we've been very consistent in that over the last couple of years.
So when you hear people like Mark Simmons from the Fire Brigades Union, and also Colin Wilson there, the independent parish councillor from Kirby near Sevenoaks, say, well, it's down to closures and it's also down to lack of staff, not as many staff, because you've had to make all these cuts. Do you think either of those arguments hold water?
I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we've been having an awful lot of change as a public service within Kent, as all public services have, and we've been looking to improve the service. And we feel we really are on a good track to do that. We're building 5 brand new fire stations within Kent over a number of years, and we think the investment that we're putting in, the public would want us to make sure that we're delivering the best possible service, and we feel we are doing that.
But you have to be judged on your response time, surely, because when you're talking about the fire service, seconds, it could be a matter of life and death. And speaking 2 years ago, the chief executive of your service, Anne Millington, she rejected claims by the Fire Brigades Union that cutting the number of fire stations means it will take longer to answer emergency calls and put lives at risk. But it is taking longer to answer emergency calls, isn't it? Because these latest figures show that there has been an improvement in 5 districts across the 13 in Kent, But there's been a fall in 8 of the districts. So in 8 districts out of the 13 fire districts in Kent, the response times are getting worse.
I think there's a couple of things on this one. I mean, we're talking here about fractions of percentages that we're talking here is that our actual overall response standards, we're 79.1% is where we are at this moment in year to date. That was up till the end of December. The thing that I would say is that the number of calls that we actually go to is going down, and I think the public of Kent will be pleased in that, and actually we're driving the number of life-threatening calls down. I mean, this year we've seen probably about 100 less house fires throughout Kent and Medway. We've seen about 1,000 less deliberate fires. But actually RTCs, road traffic collisions, we've seen a slight increase in. And I think the thing when you look at areas like the Sevenoaks area, when you look at what we cover there, you cover areas of the M26, covers the M25, is those are the areas where we are looking at the moment to try and improve our response times to things like road traffic collisions, because they're a completely different situation to attending a fire in a road. Actually, when you get onto the motorway, you've only got certain times when you can come on and come off a motorway. Finding incidents is another incident that we find on motorways. And one of the things which you could actually say to the public today when we're on there is one of the key things we need to know when you call the fire and rescue service. It may seem really, really basic, but exactly where are you if you're on one of these roads? Because if you're travelling on the M25 or the M26, quite often people, when they phone in to report a road traffic collision, aren't exactly sure about where they are.
And there's lots you can do, as you say, exactly, with the general public, getting them to be clearer, and the way the whole service has been reorganised. I guess a lot of people would understand a lot of the changes that have been made, but the bottom line is changes to part-time firefighters' contracts, if that means fewer of them are attending and response times are down. That's kind of the bottom line, isn't it, for the general public? You'll get a lot of love and an awful lot of warmth from members of the general public to what you do, but if the fire service has been reorganised to the point of actually, it actually means engines are turning up in slower response times, that's when the alarm bell starts sounding, isn't it?
I can understand people's concern, but what we would say about where we start talking about the part-time or the on-call side of the service is our on-call firefighters do an absolutely fantastic job in many villages and towns across the county. But the section had to change, you know, and we had the scenario there of where we had staff available when we didn't need them, and what we've had to do is try and turn that round. What we would say is that we know we're not there yet, and we said when we started it, this was probably about a 2 or 3 year project where we need to actually get back to where we are. We think we've made some fantastic progress. We've sorted out in relation to the contracts that our staff work, and we've got 2 other key projects which we're looking at now, which we'll probably deliver over the next couple of years, is actually about what we respond with. And I think what the public of Kent and Medway will see is that your fire and rescue service will change in the way that we actually respond to incidents. We'll have different types of emergency response vehicles, and they'll be crewed in different ways, but that's the flexibility that we need in emergency services to meet the needs of the future.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Sean Burnell there, the Assistant Director of Service Delivery for Kent Fire and Rescue Service, responding to those exclusive figures obtained by BBC Radio Kent showing a large disparity in emergency response times.